So for people who are not yet woke to the low carb, keto, carnivore, fasting thing, you really need to look into that, because it is by far the most powerful dietary therapeutic tool I have ever employed as a physician. It's even more powerful than the pharmaceutical tools that most doctors use in their daily work. And you're a lot older than I am, Peter, but man, your age, you understand that once something has went through an entire generation of humanity. So basically, your mother was born, her mother taught her this, and then she taught you this. That becomes ingrained in a almost magical way for human beings, right? Because if your grandmama told you something and your mama confirmed it, and then your doctor confirmed it, that's it. That's bedrock. You can't even argue with that, right? And that's what's happened with the calories in, calories out myth. That's what's happened with the sun myth. That's what's happened with the whole grains myth and all of the other myths that I talk about in Lies My Doctor Told Me. They've become ingrained over a complete generation. And at that point, it becomes almost, it's almost like saying to someone, no, your mama didn't know what she was talking about. I'm sorry, but your mama was wrong. And, in some parts of the country, that can lead to more words and
harsh words. Yes.
Harsh words. That's right. Yeah. And so if you fall off the house and you've got a compound femoral fracture, you need modern healthcare. If you develop type 1 diabetes and ketoacidosis, you need an intensive care unit. So in no way do I want people to think that I'm bad-mouthing modern healthcare or that I'm denigrating the practitioners of modern healthcare. In certain situations, that's absolutely what you need, and nothing else will do. But when it comes to chronic medical conditions, chronic metabolic conditions, doctors are historically and currently very, very bad at even managing them and keeping them from getting worse, not even to mention reversing those. And so metabolic syndrome is this curious thing where you have high blood pressure, you have high triglycerides, you have a waist to height ratio that's greater than 0.5, you have high blood sugar, and I would opine that we could add chronically high levels of insulin to that milieu, and that's metabolic syndrome. And so if you have metabolic syndrome, if you have 3 of any of the 5 things, and I would say there's 6, then you have the formal diagnosis of metabolic syndrome. Now, so what? What does that matter? Well, that puts you at increased risk of diabetes and all of the complications that come from it. It puts you at increased risk of hypertension and all of the complications that come from that. And when I say all of the complications, there are hundreds for both diabetes and hypertension. You are at increased risk of having heart attack and stroke. You're also, a lot of people don't realize this, you are at a greatly increased risk of having increased risk of developing cancer, especially breast cancer, prostate cancer, and some of the more common cancers. They are intimately linked with having metabolic syndrome. And so that's why I've made so many YouTube videos about the metabolic syndrome and all of the symptoms of it and signs of it, because when people understand, oh, I'm developing metabolic syndrome, there are actually dietary and lifestyle interventions that you can employ yourself at home for free that will immediately stop the progression of metabolic syndrome and indeed reverse your metabolic syndrome back to a condition of normal. We have to stop thinking of obesity as the cause of all of these metabolic problems. Obesity is just one of the symptoms that you have an underlying metabolic dysfunction. It's not the cause. And there are many prominent healthcare providers out there who will say, well, no, obesity is the cause of type 2 diabetes. Absolutely untrue, not unsubstantiated, never proven. And indeed, we see people start to reverse their type 2 diabetes and still be very, very overweight. And so it's gotten so cloudy. The water's so muddy, Peter, that even very smart healthcare providers can't tease out what's causing what, because, obesity and type 2 diabetes are very intimately related. They're highly associated, highly correlated, but that does not mean that one is causing the other. What an opportunity. That gives me goosebumps thinking about being at that moment in time with that person right after they've had that chest pain. And the heart attack's been ruled out. Good news, you haven't had a heart attack. Bad news, you're diabetic and you have high blood pressure and you're going to die 10 or 15 years sooner. That moment is such a beautiful thing for a doctor to kind of stumble into. And if in that moment, that pristine divine moment, that you have to literally give this person a 180-degree turnaround on their health, you give them this stupid advice of fruit juices and fruits and whole grains instead of, I want you to eat for the next month, I want you to eat beef, butter, bacon, and eggs, nothing but that for 30 days. And that's going to start to turn this whole thing around. And then after that, we can add some other animal-based foods and maybe a few plant-based foods back in. Can you imagine when that person, if the doctor, like I say, had said beef, butter, bacon, and eggs for a month, and then we'll talk after that. When they recheck their labs and when they remeasure their waistline and when they check their blood sugar, it's going to be a night and day difference. And they're actually going to be moving towards that health that they dreamed about when they thought they were dying on the emergency department table. And they were making those promises to the creator. If you'll just let me get through this, I'll change everything, because the false change that the healthcare provider offered them doesn't do a damn thing to help them attain their health goals. And that's what really infuriates me, is when people are truly ready. Because, if you go to the bar and you're yelling at all the